Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for The Affair, Season 1, Episode 5. And this episode was amazing. By far a November Sweeps episode, because, it is November Sweeps now, and because of that, huge things happened in this episode. We now know who died. We found out who died in this episode, which I thought was amazing. And mainly this episode, while last week's was basically a bottle episode, which, if you don't know what a bottle episode means, it's when you have I didn't talk about this last week because I didn't really know this, but it's a bottle episode is when you have the two central characters, and that's it for the whole episode in like one specific location. And while last week's episode did that, this week's episode focused more on their family and what's going on with their family life and how this whole affair has affected them. And it's really cool to see that, and I definitely really enjoyed that. And again, by far the best episode of the season, definitely, and I really, really love this episode. Just thought it was absolutely fantastic. One of the things I love about this episode was that this episode was the first episode to actually focus on Allison first. It doesn't focus on Noah first. And I thought that was very interesting that they did that they focused on Allison first. So I'm wondering if they're going to continue to do this. So let's just get to it. Now, we do find out why they're focusing on Allison first, because I do want to talk about it. So, we open with Allison in bed, and Cole is with her, and he asks if she wants to come watch him surf, and calls her Stinko, and Allison says she had trouble sleeping and wants to try to sleep for a few more hours, and as soon as he leaves the room, we hear the screen door latch. She leaps out of bed, throws off her shirt, hurriedly replaces it with a silky lavender slip dress. Cole comes back because he forgot something and sees that she's not only not sleeping, she's preening and looking to leave the house, ASAP. So they look at each other for a long, heavy moment. He explains he forgot his wax. And it's really sad to see because he has no idea that she's going to see Noah. You can tell right away, okay, she's going to see Noah. So Cole says very sadly that he's always loved her in that dress, and she doesn't seem to care at this point. And I definitely like seeing that because what I thought was really interesting in this episode is the Allison that Noah has been portraying is the Allison that we see in Allison's point of view, which I thought was definitely very cool. Because, in Noah's point of view, Allison's kind of, I don't want to say slutty, but she's very revealing, she's a lot more open to him, and Allison was like that in this, and I thought that was definitely very interesting. So she seems to feel no lingering guilt. She jumps on her bicycle, rides down an idyllic path past sparkling waters and tall seagrass with a big summer smile on her face. She arrives at the house and starts dustling and fussing. We hear a car coming down the driveway. She quickly throws on a little mood music that declares perfect. The show basically wants us to notice the music. So the song was Only Love by Ken Roberts, which I really liked. Noah's at the door. She starts kissing him, pulling him to the bedroom, pulls off her dress, and they end up having sex. So basically, after they have sex, that was definitely very abrupt what happened. So after they have sex, Noah asks who owns the house they are in, because obviously this is not Allison's house, so he wants to know, okay, where are we? And it turns out it's Allison's friend's, Phoebe, who is a touring musician. Noah asks if Allison ever considered leaving Montauk. And Allison, is like, okay, she has considered it. Because she wanted to be a doctor but couldn't afford medical school, nor could she get a scholarship because her board scores weren't good enough. And she pointedly comments that they couldn't afford the prep class that everyone takes to prepare. And Noah, who knows enough to recognize a solid job, sets her straight. And the thing with her being a doctor, we do know from the third episode that she does not want to be a doctor anymore, probably because of what happened to her with her kids. She doesn't want to see that happen again. And Noah kind of schools her here. He tells her how he was not some rich kid. And I thought this was interesting because all this time she pretty much thought he was just some rich kid and she was like the country girl. But we find out that he actually wasn't, because he grew up with a truck-driving father and a mother who worked as a waitress. And he went to college on a swimming scholarship, which is why he loves swimming so much. I really like the way the show just randomly reveals things to you. I definitely really enjoy that. Just by little conversations, we find out stuff, and it's like, okay, that's why that happened, or that's why that scene was important. So I like the way they do that, and I thought that was definitely really cool, and definitely something I've loved about The Affair. And basically, the phone rings, and it's the nursing home where Allison's grandmother is, and she refers to herself as Allison Bailey. So I thought that was definitely very interesting, because basically that is her surname, and of course, we've heard the detective call her that, and we've heard Oscar refer to her that way. So I pretty much think that's her maiden name. That's why it's Allison Bailey, because that's her maiden name, basically. and she exposed to Noah that her mother Athena is in town, and you can tell right away she is not happy that her mother's in town. And, we find out why. Because her mother has not been around for years, and she's now trying to change Allison's grandmother's Alzheimer's medication, and she works herself up in a lather over the selfishness of her mother breezing into town, stirring things up. And Noah is just like laughing about the whole thing. They agree to meet after her shift, and she arrives at the nursing home, and we meet Athena. And Athena is definitely a very interesting kind of mother. First of all, she's a hippie mother. She has, like, really long hair, jangling bangles, and, you totally believe she's Allison's mom because the way Allison's posture changes into, very, like, she's kind of like a teenager when her mother hugs her, so I thought that was interesting. So Athena sensed that she was needed and could feel it all the way from Jalper, and she thinks that the grandmother's over-medicated because she didn't recognize Athena. Hello, she has Alzheimer's, like, her mother's completely clueless. And, if you want to talk about, like, really clueless, dumb mothers, Athena. She doesn't know what Alzheimer's is. She doesn't realize, I love the fact that she does not realize that her own mother has Alzheimer's. So, basically, she instantly recognizes Allison, which goes to show that maybe Athena is just a way too much, which I thought was hilarious, that the grandmother recognizes Allison but doesn't recognize her own daughter. I mean, it's hilarious in the sense that usually it'd be the other way around, but no, Athena just has been gone that long that her own grandmother doesn't even remember her daughter. So, grandmother knows a Shelley, but no Athena, and Athena explains she changed her name and now works in energy healing. And, basically, her grandmother, Joan, and Allison adore each other clearly, and Athena feels the odd daughter out, and she brags about her hostelic private practices, but also admits she just went through a breakup, or as she puts it, came to the end of their story. So, basically, they're fighting. They're obviously not happy because, Allison is not happy of what Athena's done because of the drugs she gave to Joan, their grandmother, of course. And she's not happy about this at all because Athena, again, does not realize that she has Alzheimer's. And Athena wants to take over as health proxy, but Allison is like, are you crazy? You've never around. How would you know what to do? I completely agree with Allison saying here. She's like, look, you've never been around. How would you know what you're doing? Why should you get to take over? You've never been around. And basically Athena wants to take Allison to dinner. But Allison already has dinner scheduled at the Lockharts, and apparently the moms don't get along. Meaning, Cole's mom and Allison's mom. They don't really get along, and she doesn't really want her to come. So, Allison says she has to go take care of Phoebe's house, which is a nice, euphemism for what we know she really wants to do, which we know, we know what that means. So, she heads to the restaurant in bad spirits, where Jane is coming from. She's obviously not really happy right now. And Oscar comes in, he's a little bit hungover, and he asks to borrow Allison's phone. And he can't use the landline because he wants to talk to her brother-in-law about a delivery he's owed. So that's really weird. It definitely sounds like there's something going on with these drugs, because we know that Scottie kept going over to Oscar for drugs, so it definitely seems like this was about drugs or something like that. So Oscar asks if she's still watching Phoebe's house, which is as suspicious sounding, which is very weird that he asked that. I don't know why he asked that, but it's clearly a very slow day at the restaurant. It's not a very productive day or anything. She's watching the clock, and she has a top of annoying teen girls who are debating the amount of breaded chicken. They're like really annoying, loud teen girls. And Scottie Lockhart comes in to see Oscar. And Scottie leaves 45 minutes later with a telltale sniff. So Oscar is much more chipper after this, and he cuts Jane. And Allison is bummed it's not her, but then Oscar busts her for being late and in general acts like a creep. So what I'm kind of thinking is that maybe Scottie is giving Oscar drugs because Scottie, I don't know if he's, has the drugs already or what's going on there, but I'm definitely thinking there's something going on in terms of drugs between the two of them. I don't know what it is, but I will have to see what happens there. But that was definitely very interesting, and I thought that was definitely, overall just really, really interesting what's going on there. So we cut to the present, and we finally find out who the murder victim is, and it's pretty much who I guessed it would be. It is Scottie. which I pretty much guessed because it makes a lot of sense. First of all, there's the whole thing that Noah could have, there are so many suspects here that this opens up to. First of all, there's Noah. Noah could have done it because he catched Scottie and Whitney almost have sex. He stopped them. Scottie seemed completely okay with it. Maybe Noah was in like a fit of rage and killed Scottie. I don't know. But my personal theory is Oscar. Because if there is that theory, there's that feud between the Lockharts and Oscar's family. I don't remember his last name, but there's a feud between the two of them, and maybe there was a fight that broke out at the party, and basically maybe after the party and everything, there was a fight that broke out, and that's how Scottie died. So that's pretty much what I want to know. So Jeffries wants to know about Scottie and Oscar's relationship and why Scottie would stop by the restaurant. So, Allison does not say it's because of drugs, she doesn't say that, but she does say that the two of them were friends, and he asks her was she worried, and she says no, and she's twisting her hands very nervously beneath the table, but she says she should have been worried, and the side note, Allison is actually wearing, her little crop jacket and is wearing an elegant black top that she shows off, she's not wearing what she usually wears, so that was definitely very interesting. So, back in the past, Noah and Allison are enjoying some beers and peanut butter off the deck of Phoebe's house, and she asks him where he'd live if he could go anywhere, and he says Sonoma, and is surprised she doesn't know where it is, and he spins a yarn about them going together, and she's all, she's all like, yeah, I don't want to do that, and he's like, but I will, and that's pretty different from Noah's memory last week when he warned her he'd never leave his wife, so that definitely is very interesting, because, he said to her that he'd never leave his wife, and maybe he's not 100% honest. I mean, we do know that Noah is lying to the detective. We know that there is some lying going on with the detective, that Jeffries is lying to them. So it's very possible that Noah is lying straight to the detective about that, and he's lying straight to his face to cover something up, because I still feel he's trying to cover something up, definitely. So, he says that they drink wine all day and then sit around a cabin with no internet and a wood stove, and they talk about his teaching and how much he loves it and how he feels he has things to offer, and she smiles, and as Noah starts to leave the house, he abruptly asks if she uses protection. Why would you ask that? That's so random. Like, seriously, why would you just randomly ask that? But then she says, of course, they joke about STDs and everything. Like, that was really weird that he just randomly asked her that. He leaves and she starts to clean up, but then hears voices from the driveway, and we see Athena. And Athena is basically chatting up Noah, and it turns out that Oscar told Athena that Allison would be at Phoebe's house, so she decided to show up and join her for dinner. And that's not creepy at all. It's not creepy at all that Oscar wanted Athena to go. Oscar's really fucked up. I've said this before. He's probably the most fucked up character on the show. He's absolutely crazy. And I want to know what's going on with him, because definitely I do not really trust him at this point, because I definitely feel that he is the one that murdered Scottie. I feel that he was definitely a part of it. So as soon as he's gone, Athena's like, yeah, you are totally, he's like, oh yeah, he's great and everything. Basically, he lamely lies that he's a friend of Phoebe's, like, he's lying about it and everything. And she can tell that these two are having sex. She can just tell it from the conversation they have. She can tell that he's lying. And, Allison's trying to deny it, but Athena's an energy reader and said it's obvious that Allison just had sex. So, maybe Athena's pretty good at her job after all, and Athena's attitude, is totally like, oh, that's great that it happened to you. Like, she's happy about it. She's not upset at it or anything, so she's happy about it. And she comments that Allison's life force is back in a way she hasn't seen since Gabriel died, and that her heart is open. And Allison starts to storm away, obviously because of her mentioning Gabriel. She does not want her to mention Gabriel, but thinks better of it and invites Athena to lunch. She decides to invite her. And at the ranch, Athena does a little energy work on Allison's sister-in-law. There is some blockage in Mary Kate's sexual energy center, and all the boys are bringing down boxes from the attic due to a leak, and now we get the very awkward family dinner, and Sherry mentions that to fix the roof would have cost $50,000. So, that's obviously not good. So she then admits she recently got an offer of $30 million for the ranch, and some of the boys are all like, they're rich and everything, but Cole will not hear of it. And the ranch has been in the family for 7 generations, and Scottie doesn't agree, and they start to fight about it. So Cherry pulls Allison into the house, gives her Cherry's wedding band, and she says she wants to thank her for taking care of her son, and basically we can see right away that Cherry is actually more of a mother to her than Athena is. Cherry was there for her, and it makes sense why Cole and Allison ended up getting married, because Cherry was basically a second mother to Allison. It definitely makes sense, and now we know why Cole and Allison have known each other since they were kids. So Allison shows off her ring, and Athena completely loses it. She comments that it's just another reminder that Allison is shackled to this family. She has tons of wedding rings because she didn't get the monogamy gene. There's some animosity between the moms. Cole gets mad Athena wasn't around during the aftermath of Gabriel's death, which is understandable because this is supposed to be her daughter. She didn't even notice her daughter's, son dying. She didn't even come to the funeral. She didn't really seem to give a shit. And obviously, he's upset about that. And it makes sense why he is mad at her for that. And honestly, I would be mad at her for that. Okay, if I had, someone who, if I had a wife for someone and, their mother didn't come, I would obviously be very pissed at them because this is their daughter. This is her daughter that we're talking about, okay? This is her daughter. And her mother-in-law is more of a mother to her than her actual mother. He basically reminds her that his mother-in-law, that it was his mother who fed Allison and bathed her when she was terrified of being in the water. Because we know that Allison is terrified of water because her son died. And, I completely agree with what Cole says to her. So, basically, she calls him a bully. Allison wakes up enough to grab her mother and hustle her out of there. And, she can tell, obviously, this was not a good idea. So, in the car, Athena tells Allison that she will one day regret choosing her husband over her mother. And Allison points out that it was her mother who left, but Athena reminds her that she asked a young Allison to come with her and travel the world. Allison chose her grandparents, and, basically, she said, "You always crave security, sweetie. Maybe now that you realize that there's no such thing, you are starting to become someone else." And, I kind of agree what she's saying. Allison is sort of becoming someone else, because this is the Allison we saw in Noah's, recounting of her. When Noah was imagining her and picturing her in his retelling of the story, this is how he pictured Allison. So Allison is actually becoming this way, which I think is definitely very interesting that that's happening. I definitely really enjoyed that overall. And geez, Athena I thought that Noah's, father-in-law was bad. I thought Bruce was a bad character. Athena is so much worse. Athena is so much worse than her, and than him, and oh my god. So, back in the present, we find out that Allison is actually done with the interrogation. Jeffrey says all to her, "You can go now," and as she's about to leave, he asks her one more question. He has one more thing to ask her, and that's basically that she knows anything off about Scottie. She said she she says no, and he asks if she saw him leave, and she says no, that they left first and drove back to the city. So, this was obviously a wedding. We know this was a wedding that happened, and I'm thinking maybe here's what happened. There was some sort of war that was going on, or some sort of fight that was going on. They didn't want to be a part of it, so they left, and maybe that's why this happened. I don't know, but I think it definitely is very interesting. I definitely think it's really cool what's happened, and, Allison's now have interrogation, so at this point, I'm like, okay, maybe we're not going to see Allison's recounting of events anymore. Maybe now it's all going to be Noah's. But then we find out, later that Noah's also done, and we'll talk about that. So, let's go to Noah's point of view, which I thought was a very good story. I really enjoyed Noah's. I really enjoyed Allison's, but in my opinion, I actually like Noah's more this week. I really did, because it's really showing him and Helen's relationship falling apart, and really is completely the opposite of what he said to Jeffries, where he said he would never leave his wife, because clearly they'd have a lot of problems. So, Noah sneaks out of his bedroom where Helen sleeps, and in the hallway he notices that Whitney's missing. He runs back in and he wakes Helen up, and she tells him that Whitney slept at Ruby's house, who, of course, Ruby is that girl who Whitney's with that they don't think is a good girl, and, Helen's trying to get Whitney to make Ruby become a better person. And since he's up to go get bagels, Noah is clearly put out since the only place he was running to was Allison's. Basically was to have sex with Allison. Trevor stops him at the door, wanting to hang out. He's freaking out at him, but then he apologizes, and basically, what's interesting is in Noah's memory, Allison is wearing pants and a shirt instead of the very revealing dress that she was wearing. So that's definitely very weird that he's picturing her that way, because normally he pictures her in very skimpy, clothing, and very, slutty clothing, definitely. That's how he pictures her usually. And here, he's not picturing her that way at all. So I think it definitely is very interesting, and I don't know why he's exactly doing that. So basically, he tells her that he's got no time for figurative or literal foreplay since there's no bagels, since there's bagels still to get. He keeps getting texts from Helen, and she gives him a better cover, which basically that suggests he texts Helen and let her know that he's waiting for a fresh batch of bagels, and they're about to have sex again, but she texts back to 86 the bagels, and so basically just forget about the bagels and come back home to deal with a emergency crisis. And Noah's like, oh, I don't think it's anything that bad. So he finds out, though, that there's something wrong with Whitney, and I was thinking, okay, what could be wrong with Whitney? Maybe she was, maybe something happened to her, maybe it had something to do with that babysitting job she's taking. I honestly didn't know what was wrong with Whitney, but he drives back in the car when he gets a flat tire, and he looks for the jack, but it's gone, and he looks who's driving, and it's Oscar. So now we have to deal with this asshole again, and he decides to keep Noah company while he waits for AAA's. And Oscar points out that Noah is not exactly in the right part of town. He tells Noah that the Butlers were friends of his parents and were the ones, the first investors of the lobster roll, and that he even knew Helen when she was a kid. How does Oscar know, everyone? He knew Allison when she was a kid, and he knew Helen when she was a kid? What? This doesn't make... And he knew Cole when he was a kid? And Oscar wants to be friends and to hang out later and go fishing, but Noah sort of politely shuts that down, because obviously he can tell that there's something not right about Oscar. He can tell that Oscar is pretty much just a creep, and he shuts him down, which I think was the right thing to do, because this guy's a creep, okay? This guy's a complete creep, and if Oscar asked me to be friends with him, I'd be like, hell no. Hell no, I am not going to be friends with someone like you. You freak me out, and it's that simple. So at home, Helen's explaining the crisis, and we find out what the crisis is, that Whitney is actually bullying someone online, and the kid, Jody, tried to kill herself. So Helen wants to take Whitney finally to therapy. They confront Whitney, and she denies it all, even throws her phone into a pool before they can check for themselves, and Noah takes charge, and, he's like, you must write an apology letter to that girl right now. He's taking her over to Joey's house to apologize. Whitney throws a tantrum loud enough to attract Bruce, and Bruce, is all like, deny, he wants to get the lawyer involved, and, he's pretty much just being his asshole self, and Noah's understandably frustrated by the thwarting of his good parenting. It obviously makes sense why he's upset about it, because I think that Noah is doing the right thing here, okay? Write an apology letter, that's fine. I don't see a problem with that. She just destroyed her phone, so what else is she supposed to do? So, basically, Helen and Noah go outside, and Helen takes the position of, she's literally... I was very surprised by how Helen was reacting about this. Helen seems to be, like, a very cool, laid-back mom, and she seems to be, like, if we want to talk about the laid-back one, Noah's sort of the, the enforcer here, the one that makes the rules, he's kind of like the boss, but Helen's kind of like a laid-back mom, and she's like, oh, it's just a few text messages, don't worry about it. But he's actually very upset at her about it, and it makes sense, because she was popular when she was a kid, and he talks about how she raised their daughter to be popular, which makes sense, definitely, because a lot of popular girls are very stuck up, definitely. I can't say that for my school. I mean, I wouldn't say that there are many, like, really mean girls in my school or anything, because there's, like, a zero policy for bullying and things like that. That's a different story, though. I'm saying most times popular girls are not very nice, and it makes sense why he said that. So I definitely really enjoyed that he said that, and I agree with that. So she reminds Noah that she's been begging for ages for Whitney to be in therapy, and he replies that the problem is that they spend their summers with the morally bankrupt Butlers, and they figure out a punishment, and Helen says they should go back to Brooklyn tomorrow. I was like, what? So Noah's thinking that he's like, no, this is not going to happen, and she's surprised that he wants to stay there because, of course, he hates Bruce, he hates Margaret, he hates both of them to death, he wants nothing to do with them, so she's very surprised that he wants to stay there. And then they go back into the house, and guess who's there? Oscar. Yeah, Oscar just has to show up everywhere in this episode. I gotta say, Oscar's a really good antagonist, okay? As much as I hate him, he's a great antagonist. He really is the main antagonist of the show, and he is a really good antagonist, in my opinion. So he has Noah's AAA card, and he snars over to Helen, and he manages to drop that he ran to Noah waiting in dish planes, and Helen is understandably can't understand why Noah would be out there where there are no bagel stores at all. You know, she's not really thinking right now. So Noah gets kind of nervous, tries to hustle Oscar out of it. You know, he's basically going to tell her the truth, and he wants to say hi to Margaret and Bruce and see why they don't come into the restaurant anymore. He seems a little cooped out, frankly. He ends up, Noah ends up shoving him basically to protect his cover, which ends with Oscar saying something that I thought was definitely very interesting. He's like, I thought we were friends, man, but you're just a douche, just like the rest of them. Hello, Oscar, that's kind of you. You're kind of the douche of this show. Okay, Noah is kind of douchey at points, but if we really want to talk about the real douche, it's Oscar, okay? It takes one to know one, okay? It's that simple. So, he really is the douche there. So, Noah has completely had it. He takes Whitney to Jody's house to apologize, and Whitney is still being a bitch about it. They pull up to a decidedly more ramshackle house than the Butlers, and she claims it was all Rudy that did it. It was just a joke. And she's as righteous as any 16-year-old that can be. That Jody, he says, she basically says that Jody, the Twitter account was Skanko Jody, and Jody liked to be called a Skanko, reportedly because she slept with Rudy's boyfriends. So, Noah's freaked out by Winnie's lack of empathy. Words and actions have consequence. She wants to know if he now thinks that she's a bad person. And Noah says, he says no, but she's done a bad thing. And Winnie is saying, she's like, let's say I've done a lot of bad things. And Noah tells her would make her an asshole. She doesn't want to be that and wants to know how to un-asshole herself. What I personally think this is trying to show is that Winnie does not want to be this kind of person. She doesn't want to be a bad person. She wants to change herself. She doesn't want to be an asshole, basically. And she knows that she's done bad and she wants to make up for it. So, basically, he repeats to himself after Whitney, he just tells her to stop doing bad things. She gets out of the car, she goes to Jody's front door, and he says it to himself. And I like that he said that because he is doing bad things. So I definitely really enjoyed that he said that. So Noah tells Whitney that that Whitney did great, and Helen's therapist is looking for a local therapist for Whitney, and says they should be having family dinners and be more involved. And Noah's very surely about this, and Helen's new natural deodorant doesn't work, and maybe she thinks she should give up her store to be around more for the kids. And she thinks maybe Noah could take the semester off, but Noah sees his perceived manhood slipping down the drain as Helen points out that he doesn't really need to work because they could borrow more money from his parents, and Noah says, no way, and Helen's like, fine, but you're never going to be successful if you don't write more than one book a decade, and she's stammering around trying to walk that one back. Noah's basically like, I'm out, okay? He's like, I don't care what you have to say, I'm out of here. She drops the other shoe, and, she realizes that the bagels come up again, that he, forgot the bagels, and he runs out straight to Allison. He obviously is very pissed off at her, and I really like seeing this, because it's really showing that the two of them really don't have a good marriage anymore. They really don't. They had a fight, and basically, Noah's like to the detective, I love what he says, Jeffries. He's like, do you really care about a fight that me and my wife had? And he's like, no, I don't. So he actually is letting him go, surprisingly, which I thought was interesting. That the detective is letting Allison go and Noah go. So are we going to continue seeing the split story format? Is this going to change, sort of? Because now they're both being let go. So is this going to change or something? I don't know what's going to happen here. But I think it definitely is very interesting that they're both being let go. So Noah wants to know if he was helpful. And Noah asks if they have anyone in mind, and the detective says yes without elaboration. And Noah asks him what makes him so sure it wasn't an accident. The detective doesn't believe in accidents, and he asks Noah if he's ever heard of a club called The End, which Scottie was heading to when he died. And Noah's twitching about this. Clearly, he is very put off by it. He's like, oh no, I never heard of it. But I don't believe that. I think that, there's a reason why he was twitching because of it. The detective asks if he's ever been there, and Noah bursts into flames. He says never, and I think it definitely, Noah's trying to hide something. I don't know if he was involved with the murder of Scottie or whatever, but definitely he knows that club, okay? Because he knows that club. He flinched. He obviously is very put off by that club. He obviously does not want to hear about it. So, there definitely is something more going on there, and I'm very interested in seeing what actually is going on there, because that definitely is very interesting. So, we go back to the summer, and Noah heads back to Phoebe's, where Allison waits. He's very somber. She asks what's wrong, and they have sex, and he asks if she wants to run away with him, and that's how the episode ends. So apparently the affair is now like Romeo and Juliet because they're planning on running away together, and I think that definitely is very interesting. Now let's talk a little about this episode. By far the best episode of the season. I loved it. We're at the half point of the season now, which I just realized. So definitely it makes sense why they revealed the murdered person because now we're getting to the second half of the season. So the interrogation process is over. So my question is, how are they going to continue the split story format? They are definitely going to continue. I mean, the flashbacks we do see in the preview, but how are they going to continue? Are they going to continue the split story format, or are they going to do just what happened? Because there's no more interrogation, so I think that definitely is very interesting. What are they trying to hide? Because definitely Noah did go to that club. What are they trying to hide? Who do you think murdered Scottie? I personally think it was Oscar or Noah. I think those really are the only two possible suspects in my opinion. What do you think of Noah and Helen's, like, flashback? Do you think that's... I definitely think it's very interesting. It opens up a lot of possibilities that I think they definitely are probably going to end up getting a divorce. I don't know. I think they definitely are. We'll have to see what happens there. Do you think that Whitney is trying to become a better person? I just personally think that she is. As far as Allison and Athena go, do you think we're going to see Allison and Athena again? I think that definitely is very interesting what's going on there. And we'll have to see what ends up happening. But that's basically for my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for my review of tonight's episode of the originals. So I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.